Please note, Night Terrors is for a mature audience only. Episodes may contain language, violent images, and extreme gore. Welcome back, dear listeners. Lend me your ears, for tonight I weave a tale of courage, kinship, and the shadows that test the brightest of hearts. It is a tale of 4 adventurers bound by fate, a steadfast warrior weathered by the storms of countless battles, a sorceress whose magic dances with the fire of youth, a bard with a heart untainted by the world's cruelties, and a noble paladin who walks the path of righteousness. Our story begins with a simple quest, one that promises honor and purpose, a chance to stand against the encroaching darkness. But as you will see, even the simplest paths can lead to uncharted horrors, where the brightest lights are swallowed by the blackest voids. Hear now the tale called The Hollow Light of Valor. In a quiet forest clearing sat a Goliath, his massive frame illuminated by the flickering flames of a campfire. His name was Thaldor Ironbrand, a warrior of great renown who had once laid down his axe, intending to spend his final years in peace. His bald head gleamed faintly in the firelight, and his weathered face was marked by deep scars that spoke of countless battles fought and won. Broad-shouldered and towering, even by Goliath's standards, Thaldor carried an air of quiet strength and wisdom earned through decades of hardship. His weapon, a massive battle-axe known as Bjornklo, rested within arm's reach, a reminder that the warrior's instincts never truly rested. Though he had planned to retire, his paternal bond with 2 siblings he traveled with had reignited his sense of purpose. He had taken under his wing Alira, a young elven sorceress brimming with raw magical talent, and her half-brother Finnan, a wide-eyed bard whose boundless curiosity and wanderlust reminded Thaldor of days long past. The old warrior had come to see them as his own children, dedicating his remaining strength to ensuring they could survive the world's many dangers. Alira was a prodigy, her magic flowing as naturally as breath. Slender and graceful, with hair like spun silver cascading down her back, she had eyes that shimmered like emeralds under sunlight. Though young by elven standards, she carried herself with a poise and wisdom beyond her years. Her fingers often traced idle sigils in the air, her mind always half occupied with perfecting a new spell. Her power, though raw, had proven invaluable to their group, and she had an unshakable determination to protect her brother at all costs. While she never spoke much about their mother, it was clear she felt a deep responsibility for Finnan, as though she were fulfilling a promise left unspoken. Finnan, on the other hand, was her opposite. Where Alira was calm and deliberate, Finnan was a bundle of energy. His auburn hair was perpetually unkempt, and his hazel eyes sparkled with unbridled enthusiasm. He was shorter than his sister, and far more prone to distraction, often composing songs in his head or tinkering with his lute, even in the midst of their travels. His laughter was infectious, and his heart, as pure as freshly fallen snow, made him beloved by all who met him. But beneath his light-hearted demeanor was a deep longing to prove himself worthy of the adventures he chronicled. He often spoke fondly of their shared mother, marveling at the stories she told of elven magic and bardic lore, which had inspired him to pursue his craft. The 3 of them had been a team for over a year, taking on small tasks and jobs to support themselves. But the true turning point of their story came when they crossed paths with Sir Alric, a paladin of some renown. It was in a small, unassuming village that they had encountered him. His arrival had been serendipitous, or so it seemed. Finnan had recognized the name instantly, regaling the others with the tales of Sir Alric's heroic deeds, slaying a dragon that plagued the northern provinces, rescuing a duchess from bandits, and leading victorious charges in battles long past. Sir Alric was a striking figure. His polished armor gleamed in the sunlight, each piece engraved with intricate holy symbols. His helm bore the crest of his divine order, and a greatsword hung at his side, its hilt wrapped in leather worn smooth by years of use. His voice carried the weight of command, calm and measured, and his every movement exuded confidence. Yet it was his eyes, a piercing shade of blue that captured attention, shining with the conviction of a man on a holy mission. His demeanor left little room for doubt. He was the hero of legend Finnan had so often sung about. Sir Alric had approached them with a request. He sought a team brave enough to accompany him on a sacred quest to retrieve a key that would unlock a small, unassuming chest that he already carried. The artifact contained within, he explained, was said to hold the power to defeat an ancient evil, and his god had tasked him with ensuring it did not fall into the wrong hands. However, the key was guarded by a spirit naga, a creature of immense cunning and cruelty. Finnan had been ecstatic, viewing the opportunity as nothing short of destiny. A legend? Asking us for help? Finnan had whispered that night as the group discussed Alric's offer. How could we say no? Thaldor, ever cautious, had been less convinced.
Heroes don't wander into nowhere villages without a reason,
he had grumbled. But even he could not deny the allure of such a quest, and so, with the promise of glory and purpose, they agreed to join Sir Alric. The paladin had seemed every bit the hero from the ballads Finnan adored. His armor gleamed, his voice carried the weight of command, and his presence inspired confidence. The group set out together, unaware of what lay ahead or the dark truths that waited to be revealed. The path to Vasasithra, the spirit naga's lair, was treacherous, winding through a dense, mist-laden swamp where each step sank into waterlogged soil. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the occasional splash hinted at unseen creatures lurking in the murky depths. The party moved cautiously, their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the gloom for signs of danger. The entrance to the spirit naga's lair loomed ahead, a jagged opening in a rocky outcropping half submerged into the swamp. Strange symbols were etched into the stone around the entrance, glowing faintly with an unnatural green light. Alric was the first to speak, his voice slow but commanding. Be on your guard. Vasasithra will not welcome visitors. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the narrow tunnel. A faint, eerie glow illuminated the walls, revealing more of the strange symbols etched into the stone. Finnan shivered, clutching his lute tightly. Charming place, he muttered, trying to mask his nerves. Thaldor grunted, his massive frame taking up most of the tunnel.
Keep close, lad. This beast isn't going to greet us with tea and biscuits.
Alira summoned a small orb of light, its warm glow cutting through the gloom. Stay focused, she said softly. We don't know what we'll face in there. The tunnel widened into a cavern, its vast expanse illuminated by bioluminescent mushrooms clinging to the walls and ceiling. At the center of the cavern lay Vasasithra, her serpentine form coiled atop a mound of treasure. Her scales shimmered with a sickly iridescence, and her eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. The spirit Naga raised her head, her forked tongue flickering as she regarded the intruders.
"Foolish mortals,"
Vasasithra hissed, her voice a sibilant echo that seemed to emanate from every corner of the cavern.
"You dare to enter my domain? I shall devour you and add your possessions to my hoard."
Finnin stepped back instinctively, but his trembling fingers found the strings of his lute. Summoning his courage, he began to play, his voice soft but steady. A song of courage, a song of might, to guide us through this darkest night. His melody filled the cavern, bolstering his companions with bardic inspiration. Thaldor roared,
Bjornclaw!
And he charged forward, his great axe flaring with blue light. Vasasithra recoiled, hissing in fury as the Goliath's first strike cleaved into her coiled body. Black ichor splattered across the cavern floor, and the Naga's eyes burned with rage. The spirit Naga retaliated with lightning speed, her tail whipping around to slam into Thaldor's side. The force sent him sprawling, his massive frame skidding across the cavern floor. Thaldor groaned, but pushed himself to his feet, blood dripping from a fresh wound on his temple. Alira stepped forward, her hands weaving intricate patterns as she chanted an incantation. Her voice rang out, sharp and melodic. "Scalthorus!" She thrust her arms forward, and 3 brilliant rays of fire shot from her hands. The scorching ray spell struck Vasasithra's body, leaving scorched marks along her shimmering scales. The Naga let out a shriek of rage, her glowing eyes locking onto the sorceress, and then onto Finnin.
"You little one,"
Vasasithra hissed at Finnin, her voice dripping with venomous intent.
"Such a fragile mind. So easy to bend. Come to Vasasithra."
Her eyes glowed brighter, and Finnin froze, his lute slipping from his grasp as her magic took hold. He began to step forward, his movements slow and dreamlike, drawn to the Naga's hypnotic gaze. "Finnin, no!" Alira cried, but the bard continued his trance-like approach. Alira, her voice trembling with desperation, began a new incantation. With a sharp gesture, she cast an entangle spell, vines bursting from the cavern floor to ensnare Finnin's legs. The bard struggled against the magical restraints, his expression blank, but the spell held firm, halting his advance.
Foul creature!
Alric shouted, his greatsword gleaming as he charged forward. The blade carved into Vasasithra's body, and she writhed in agony, her tail lashing wildly. Alric's strikes were precise and unrelenting, forcing the Naga to turn her full attention on him, and she retaliated with a blast of necrotic energy, the dark magic slamming into the paladin and forcing him to one knee. Seizing the opportunity, Thaldor rose to his feet, his grip tightening on Bjornclaw. With a primal roar, he brought the axe down on Vasasithra's head, the weapon's enchanted edge cleaving through her skull. The spirit Naga let out a final shuddering hiss before collapsing onto the treasure mound, her iridescent scales dimming as the life drained from her body. The cavern fell silent, save for the group's labored breaths echoing in the aftermath. Alira released the entangle spell, and Finnin collapsed to the ground, trembling. I'm sorry, he stammered, clutching his lute with shaking hands. It's not your fault, Alira said gently, kneeling beside him. Her magic was strong, too strong. Thaldor leaned heavily on Bjornclaw, his armor spattered with ichor and blood.
It is dead,
he said, his voice rough. "It is dead," Alric confirmed. "But, unfortunately, not for long. Spirit Naga have a very annoying habit of returning to life, so we should be swift. And here is what we came for." Amid the treasures, Thaldor found a golden armband etched with runes that hummed faintly with power. Alira uncovered a flawless diamond orb, its core swirling with faint blue light. Finnan reached for a shimmering silvery cloak, its fabric as light as air. Alira smiled faintly, recognizing the enchantment woven into it. "A cloak of elven kind," she said, draping it over Finnan's shoulders. "It'll help you stay hidden when you need it most." Finally, Alric retrieved a small, unassuming key from the pile. He held it up to the light, his expression unreadable. "The key to unlocking our salvation," he murmured. "We must move quickly. The creature will not remain dead for long." As the party stepped out of the cavern, their resolve hardened. They couldn't shake the unease that lingered in the air. Something about their victory felt incomplete. The group trudged along a narrow dirt path that cut through dense forest, the towering trees casting long shadows under the moonlight. The battle with Vasasithra weighed heavily on them, but the golden treasure and the iron key now in their possession gave a sense of accomplishment. The night air was cool, filled with the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. Finnan adjusted his cloak of elven kind around his shoulders, its silken material blending almost seamlessly into the darkness around him. "It feels, strange," he murmured, glancing at Alira. "Like it's hiding me, even when I don't try." "That's exactly what it does," Alira replied with a faint smile. "It's enchanted to make you harder to see, even in plain sight. It will be invaluable if we need stealth."
"Especially for you,"
Thaldor rumbled, his deep voice breaking through the quiet. He glanced back at Finnan, his grizzled face softening with a rare smile.
"No offense, boy, but you're not exactly the quiet type."
Finnan laughed nervously. "None taken. I'll take all the help I can get." Sir Alric, who had been walking slightly ahead, raised a hand to signal for a halt. "We'll rest here for the night," he said, his tone firm. "The next part of the journey will be even more dangerous. We'll need to be at full strength." The party gathered around a small clearing, and Thaldor quickly set about starting a fire. The old Goliath's massive hands belied a surprising skill with flint and tinder, and soon the warmth of flames spread across the clearing. Finnan broke the silence first, plucking a few soft chords on his lute before speaking. "That was something," he said, his voice light but tinged with lingering nervousness. "I've never seen anything like that before. A monster like Vasasithra, and treasure like that." He tugged at the cloak around his shoulders, its silvery threads shimmering faintly. "It feels like something out of a story I'd write." Alira, seated nearby with her spellbook in her lap, glanced up and smiled faintly. "Not every story ends well," she said softly. "But you did well, Finn. Your song kept us going when it mattered." Thaldor let out a low chuckle, though it turned into a wince as he adjusted his posture.
"You're not wrong about the treasure, lad. This armband's got some power to it,"
he said, raising his arm to show the golden band now secured around his wrist.
"But Bjornklo still did most of the work."
He gave the axe a pat, the weapon resting beside him on the ground. Finnan looked at him with wide eyes. "Bjornklo. When you shouted its name, it glowed. It's magic, isn't it? Did your clan make it?" Before Thaldor could respond, Alric turned from his watchful post and spoke, his voice calm and inquisitive. "I heard you shout the name during the fight," he said. "Bjornklo. It's not just a weapon to you, is it?" Thaldor leaned forward, resting his broad hands on his knees. His gaze settled on the axe, his expression a mixture of pride and solemnity.
Bjornclaw is more than a weapon,
he began.
It's a legacy, forged by my great ancestors generations ago, long before my time. The runes you see along the blade were carved by the shamans of my clan, imbued with the strength of the bear. The name Bjornclaw means bear claw. They say the spirit of the bear resides in the axe, lending its ferocity to the one who wields it.
He picked up the axe, running a calloused hand along the edge.
It was forged during a time of great need, when my people were under siege by an army of raiders. The smiths and shamans worked tirelessly, pouring their blood, sweat, and magic into this very blade. When the weapon was finished, it wasn't just a tool for battle. It was a symbol of hope and defiance.
Thaldor's voice softened, his gaze growing distant.
Bjornclaw has been passed down through my family ever since. It's seen countless battles, protected countless lives. And now, it's mine to carry. But it's not just my strength that carries anymore.
He glanced at Finnan and Alira, his eyes filled with a rare tenderness.
When I left my clan, I thought I'd lost my family. But then I found you two. Alira, with your fiery determination. Finnan, with your songs and your heart bigger than the world itself. Ha! You gave this old Goliath a new purpose, a new family to protect. Bjornclaw's strength is yours now, just as much as it's mine.
Finnan's expression softened, his hazel eyes glistening. Thaldor, that means a lot, he said quietly. You've always been there for us. I can't thank you enough. Alira smiled, her voice gentle. And we'll stand by you, Thaldor, just as you've stood by us. Alric watched the exchange, his face unreadable. After a pause, he finally broke the silence. We must focus on what lies ahead. He stepped closer to the fire, the key glinting on his belt. The Naga was only the first challenge. The true enemy waits, and it will be far more dangerous. Finnan's curiosity, however, was not yet sated. His gaze shifted to the box that Alric had placed beside him. "Can I see the artifact?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Alric regarded him for a moment before nodding. He knelt and unlatched the box, revealing the horn within. Its jagged, broken surface glinted menacingly, the runes etched along its length, pulsing faintly in the firelight. Finnan leaned closer, his eyes wide with awe. "It's incredible," he murmured, reaching out to touch it. His fingers brushed the sharp tip of the horn, and he winced as it pricked his skin. A single drop of blood fell onto the artifact, and the runes flared brightly for an instant. The group tensed. "What just happened?" Alira asked sharply, her hands already glowing with the beginnings of a spell. Alric raised a calming hand. "Be at ease," he said smoothly. "The artifact reacts to blood, but it is only dangerous to those who are most foul and evil. Young Finnan is far from that." He closed the box with deliberate care. "The artifact is safe as long as it remains in the right hands." Finnan flexed his hand, still staring at the box. "It's powerful," he said softly. Alira moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "And dangerous," she added. "Don't forget that." The fire crackled, and the group settled into a quiet unease. The night stretched on, and though their bodies rested, their minds remained vigilant, each turning over unspoken thoughts of what lay ahead. The first rays of dawn had long since faded into the heavy shadows of the valley as the group approached the crumbling temple. The once grand structure loomed before them, its cracked stone pillars and weathered carvings a testament to centuries of neglect. The faint glow from within pulsed like a heartbeat, an ominous warning of the power that waited inside. The air was thick with dread, and the faint scent of decay lingered. The group hesitated at the threshold, their breaths visible in the unnatural chill that emanated from the temple's depths. Thaldor grunted, gripping Bjornklo tightly.
"The air reeks of death, and worse. Whatever's inside isn't going down easily."
Sir Alric nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Steel yourselves. This is where the true battle begins." They stepped into the temple, their footsteps echoing ominously. The walls were adorned with carvings depicting twisted creatures and violent rituals, their grotesque details illuminated by Alira's soft, glowing orb of light. Bones littered the floor, ancient and brittle, but arranged in deliberate patterns that seemed to shift in the corner of the eye. As they entered the main chamber, the oppressive air thickened. The ceiling stretched impossibly high into darkness, and the cracked floor was strewn with bones of various shapes and sizes. At the center stood a massive stone altar, its surface glistening with some dark, unidentifiable substance. A deep, guttural laugh echoed from the shadows, chilling the group to their cores. The ground trembled, and a voice resonated through the chamber, shaking the very walls.
"Fools!"
it sneered.
"You dare to challenge me in my domain?"
The altar erupted with black flames, and a towering figure emerged from the shadows. Its skeletal frame was wreathed in flickering darkness, and its hollow eyes burned with malevolent light. It raised a clawed hand, and the bones scattered across the floor began to rattle violently.
"Defend me, my servants!"
the entity roared. Bones flew together with unnatural speed, forming savage skeletal creatures with glowing red eyes and jagged claw-like hands. In front of the group, a massive pile of bones began to shift and rise. Slowly, a bone golem assembled itself, its form grotesque and hulking, standing nearly twice the height of Thaldor. Its body was a patchwork of fused skulls and rib cages, and its limbs ended in jagged bone blades that scraped the stone floor with each movement. Its empty eye sockets glowed with a menacing green light. The creature let out a hollow roar, a sound that reverberated deep in their chests before lunging toward the group. "Scatter!" Sir Alric barked, drawing his greatsword. "Thaldor, take the golem! Alira, clear the minions!" Thaldor roared, "Bjornklo!" as his weapon flared with blue light. He charged at the bone golem, swinging his massive axe in a wide arc. The blade bit into the creature's arm, cracking the bone with a sickening sound, but the golem retaliated with a devastating backhand that sent the Goliath skidding across the chamber. Alira took a step back, her hands weaving intricate patterns as she chanted an incantation. She thrust her arms forward, and the air around her shimmered with raw energy. "Thrakorja!" she shouted. A thunderous explosion erupted in the midst of the skeletal minions, shattering several of them into shards of bone that clattered uselessly to the ground. Others staggered, their movements jerky but relentless as they continued their advance. Finnan began to play, his fingers dancing across the strings of his lute as he sang a song of courage. His magic wove through the air, bolstering his companions and sharpening their focus. But even as the bard's music filled the chamber, his heart raced as he watched Thaldor struggle against the hulking construct and Alira become surrounded by the relentless skeletal warriors. The skeletal minions pressed closer to Alira, their crimson eyes glowing with hunger. She cast another spell, sending a wave of force that shattered several of them. But they kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Sweat dripped down her brow as she fought to keep them at bay. Thaldor, bloodied but unbroken, rose to his feet and swung Bjornklo again, the enchanted axe cleaving through the bone golem's arm. The creature roared, its green glowing eyes flaring with rage as it struck back, landing a blow that sent Thaldor to one knee. His armor dented and his breath labored, the Goliath gritted his teeth and raised his axe for a final strike. With a primal shout, Thaldor brought Bjornklo down in a devastating arc, shattering the bone golem into a pile of lifeless bones. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, but the victory was short-lived. The bones began to move again, reassembling with eerie speed.
"It's reforming!"
Thaldor shouted, his voice filled with frustration. Meanwhile, Alric stood face to face with the ancient evil. His holy symbol glowed brilliantly as he raised it high, his voice ringing with authority.
"By the light of Tyr, I command you to falter!"
The creature recoiled slightly, its advance momentarily halted, but Alric's hand trembled as he strained to hold the spell. The light from the symbol grew brighter, casting long shadows across the chamber.
"Finnin!"
Alric called, his voice filled with urgency.
"Take the horn and finish this! It's the only way!"
Finnin's eyes widened as Alric hurried to his side, thrusting the wooden box into his hands.
"You must stab the horn into its heart,"
Alric said, his voice steady but strained.
"It will destroy the creature!"
Finnin hesitated, his hands trembling as he opened the box and stared at the jagged horn.
Me? I can't.
"You can,"
Alric interrupted, gripping Finnin's shoulder.
"You've been chosen for this. Trust the cloak. Trust yourself. Do it for them."
He gestured towards Alira and Thaldor. Alira's magic was faltering as the skeletal warriors closed in, and Thaldor's heavy breathing echoed as he prepared for another clash with the reforming golem. Summoning his courage, Finnin nodded.
"Okay, I'll do it."
He slipped the cloak of elvenkind tighter around himself and stepped into the shadows. The magic of the cloak took hold, rendering him almost invisible as he crept along the edges of the chamber. Every step felt like an eternity, his heart pounding in his ears as he edged closer to the towering entity. The air grew colder, and a suffocating sense of dread pressed down on him. He could feel the malice radiating from the creature, a darkness that seemed to claw at his very soul. The battle raged around him. Alira unleashed another spell, sending a wave of flame toward the advancing skeletal warriors, but they kept coming, their clawed hands reaching for her. Thaldor let out a roar as he swung Bjornklo at the reforming bone golem, his strike slower but no less fierce. Alric's light flickered, the strain of the paladin nearing its limit. Finnin thought of Alira and Thaldor, of their unwavering support, of the bond they shared as a family. "I can do this," he whispered, gripping the horn tightly. With a surge of courage, Finnin darted forward, his movements swift and silent. The entity didn't see him coming until it was too late. The bard raised the horn high, its runes blazing like fire, and plunged it deep into the creature's chest. The chamber erupted with a violent shockwave as Finnin plunged the horn into the heart of the ancient evil. The blast of crimson energy radiated outwards, shattering every undead creature in the room into dust. The bone golem crumbled instantly, and the skeletal minions disintegrated into fine powder. Thaldor and Alira were thrown to the ground, their senses dulled as they struggled to recover. For a brief moment, there was silence. Alira groaned, pulling herself to her knees. She reached for Thaldor, who was lying nearby, bloodied and bruised but conscious. Relief washed over her face as she glanced around, thinking the nightmare was finally over. But then her gaze fell on Finan. The young bard stood motionless at the epicenter of the blast, the horn still clutched in his trembling hand. Crimson energy began to pour from the horn, snaking its way into his body. His eyes widened in horror as the runes on the horn disappeared, reappearing as glowing symbols etched onto his own skin.
Alira! Thaldor!
Finan managed to whisper, his voice weak and trembling. But before they could respond, his body arched violently, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. From Finan's perspective, the pain was unimaginable. It felt as though his very soul was being torn apart and reshaped. His mind was assaulted by a torrent of memories, centuries of life filled with unimaginable cruelty and malice. He saw the creature's countless atrocities, kingdoms burned to ash, innocents slaughtered, and the souls of the damned consumed to fuel its endless hunger. The sheer weight of the evil threatened to crush his very essence. The runes burned into his skin glowed brighter, spreading like veins of fire across his arms, chest, and face. He clawed at himself, desperate to stop the transformation, but it was unstoppable. His auburn hair darkened to jet black, his hazel eyes became twin orbs of blazing crimson, and his youthful features twisted into a visage both familiar and monstrous. The runes pulsed with malevolent energy, covering his face in intricate patterns that seemed to writhe as if alive. Finan's scream grew louder, then abruptly stopped. He straightened, his movements unnaturally fluid. The transformation was complete. The figure before them still bore Finan's form, but it was something else entirely. His posture exuded power and malice, and his voice, when it came, was layered, a deep, otherworldly tone beneath the remnants of Finan's.
"At last,"
he said, his lips curling into a cruel smile.
"A body worthy of my greatness. The time of my suffering is over."
"Finan!" Alira screamed, scrambling to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she began to weave an incantation, desperate to act. "Please, fight it! You're stronger than this!" The creature turned its crimson gaze upon her, its expression devoid of recognition.
"Finan is gone,"
it said coldly. Before Alira could complete her spell, Sir Alric stepped forward, his movements swift and precise. His greatsword drove through her back, the blade piercing clean through her chest and embedding itself into the stone floor beneath her. She gasped, blood spurting from her lips as her hands faltered, the magic dissipating into nothingness. Her wide eyes turned to meet Alric's, confusion and betrayal etched into her face. Alric leaned in close, his voice dripping with mockery.
"You should have stayed down,"
he said, as he unceremoniously dropped the paladin's holy symbol to the ground in front of her, the once sacred emblem clattering lifelessly against the stone. Thaldor roared, his rage igniting as he struggled to his feet.
"You bastard!"
he bellowed, his muscles straining against the pain. But before he could act, Finan, no, the entity, raised a hand and made a subtle gesture. Thaldor's body froze in place, his limbs locked by an invisible force. He struggled against it, his eyes burning with fury, but he was utterly helpless. Alric turned to face the immobilized Goliath, his expression shifting to one of smug satisfaction. He gestured toward the fallen holy symbol. "A trinket," he said dismissively. "The real Sir Alric had no use for it in the end, just as he had no use for his life." He began to pace, his voice taking on a theatrical tone. "You see, Thaldor, Sir Alric was a man of conviction, of unshakable faith. It made him easy to kill. His trust in my fabricated plight, my poor desperate plea for aid, led him right into my trap. I took great pleasure in dispatching him. His cries, his prayers to tear, they fell silent beneath my blade." Alric smiled cruelly, his eyes narrowing. Assuming his identity was almost too easy. His armor, his sword, his reputation, it all became mine. I've worn his name like a mask, fooling countless fools, all in pursuit of a single purpose: to find a vessel pure enough, strong enough to house my master's essence. Your bard was perfection, so naive, so pure. He turned back to the Dark Lord, bowing his head. "And now, my lord, the task is complete. The vessel is yours, as promised." The Dark Lord's lips curled into a faint smile. "Indeed, you have proven most useful." He turned his gaze to Alira, whose trembling fingers reached feebly toward Finnan. Her eyes, filled with pain and desperation, locked onto her brother's transformed form. Her vision blurred, the life draining from her body. The last thing she saw before death claimed her was the monster her brother had become, his glowing crimson eyes staring back at her with cruel indifference. The Dark Lord stepped towards Thaldor, who was still immobilized but fully aware. He stopped just inches from the Goliath, his gaze cold and calculating. "You have served your purpose well, old warrior," he said, his voice slow and commanding. "You cared for this vessel, nurtured it, and delivered it to me. For that, I grant you a gift: your life." The Dark Lord leaned in, his voice dripping to a sinister whisper. "Live with this memory, Thaldor. Live with the knowledge that you failed, that everything you held dear is gone because of you." He straightened and turned, striding toward the exit with deliberate steps. His voice echoed through the chamber as he left. "This form is perfect." Alric stood, his smug expression fixed firmly in place. He approached Thaldor, his gaze flickering to the Goliath's axe, which lay discarded nearby. He bent down, picking it up and examining it with mock curiosity. "This old thing?" he said, his tone condescending. "Barely worthy of chopping firewood." He slung the axe over his shoulder, smirking as he turned to leave. "I think I'll keep it, though. A memento of sorts." Thaldor's rage boiled over, but he remained frozen, his body refusing to obey his will. Alric's laughter echoed as he exited the chamber, leaving Thaldor alone in the ruins. As the silence settled, the spell holding Thaldor finally released. He collapsed to his knees, his body trembling. His chest heaved with ragged breaths as the weight of his failure bore down on him. Alira was dead. His Finnan was gone, consumed by an ancient evil. And he, the protector, had failed them both. Thaldor let out a guttural cry, raw and filled with anguish. The sound reverberated through the empty chamber, a haunting echo of all he had lost. And there you have it, dear listeners. Poor Thaldor, the mighty Goliath, left alive, not as a reward, but as a cruel twist of fate. That's a wound no blade could match. Meanwhile, young Finnan, once a sweet, naive bard, is now something more. A promotion, you might call it, though the job perks are questionable at best. A dark lord strides free, the false paladin escapes with a smug grin, and our poor sorceress, well, she won't be sending any more fireballs, will she? A happy ending for some, I suppose, but for Thaldor, sweet, broken Thaldor, the nightmare is just beginning. Sweet nightmares. If you're enjoying the stories from the Ranger's Grove, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you.